You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. Before we put the car in gear, just a reminder, take a moment, go to iTunes, give us a rating, let us know what you think. Your thoughts are very important to us, and your feedback helps us make this show that much better. Today's topic is sports photography. John Harris and I will be talking with Gail Buckland, an author and or collaborator on 14 books on photography and photo history. Most recently, Who Shot Sports? A Photographic History, 1843 to the Present, and it's published by Alfred Knopf. It's an amazing book that goes way beyond splashy pictures of skiers and football players. It's about journalism. It's about advances in photographic concepts and technologies, pop culture, and world history. In her spare time, Gail is a distinguished professor of the history of photography at the Cooper Union. She's also the curator of Who Shot Sports, which is based on the book, and currently on view at the Brooklyn Museum. If you happen to be in New York City before January 2017, do yourself a favor and visit this incredible exhibition. We're also being joined by Andrew Bernstein, who's been shooting sports and sports figures for over 30 years. Andrew helped create NBA Photos and became the league's first official photographer and senior director. Andrew's time with the NBA goes back to the Showtime era of Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And rumor has it that some of the photographs of Kareem's skyhooks decorated John Harris's bedroom walls when he was growing up. We're going to investigate that further. Andrew and his company are also the official photographer of the Los Angeles Lakers, Clippers, Kings, and Dodgers, and he has served as director of photography for Staples Center and Microsoft Theater in Los Angeles since opening day in 1999. In 2010, Andrew co-authored Journey to the Ring with Phil Jackson, documenting the Lakers' 2009-2010 championship season. Welcome, both of you, and we're going to start with Gail.
Hi.
Hi there.
Thanks for coming, guys. I really appreciate it.
It's great.
Happy to be here.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I just want to get out up front is that we were talking a bit earlier. I'm not into sports. I really couldn't give a hoot about sports. However, the book that you have here, Gail, is phenomenal. I started going through it, and I realized it's not sports is just a thread that holds the story together, but it goes back through history, and it gives you a lot of interesting insights of what was going on at different times, how sports played into that, and also a lot about how photography has advanced because of sports itself. It's driven a lot of the technologies. And I just found it to be an amazing document that, again, shouldn't be limited just to sports. If you're interested in photography, it's a great book that I think will be making the rounds for a while. How did you get into this?
Well, thank you, Alan, for those compliments. I love photography. Like you, I'm not a sports fanatic. I'm a photo fanatic. I am passionate about photography, and I studied history and love taking pictures, but I really had to earn a living, and I combined my love of history with photography. And I tell my students I'm still learning all the time by looking at photographs. And case in point, I have learned so much about cultural history, art history. Sports is, as you say, much more than who wins or loses the game. It's the human drama.
Yeah.
The Greeks knew it. They put their finest artists to depict the greatest athletes. I was just at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and on the great urns, you have the great athletes
Oh, yeah.
depicted. Well, flash forward. The mantle has been passed to photographers. They now give sports its image. And what is that image? The press may publish certain photographs, but the photographers themselves, Andrew included, they have many photographs that they've taken that describe much more than any one event. People love sports, and the really great photographers make pictures that help explain why we're attracted to sports, why we love sports. We all walk around with our human bodies, but we recognize we can't do what our heroes do. but a sports photographer can encapsulate what it means to achieve greatness in many ways. And the response to Who Shot Sports has been so multifaceted because, yes, I do write about cultural history because sports is part of cultural history. I write sometimes about art history because artists have been looking at sports photographs since the time of Muybridge.
Yeah.
And I write about photographic history because sports photographers, more than any other group, have pushed camera technology. Andrew will probably address what cameras, what lenses, what he uses. It's unbelievable how he uses the technology to give us images that we can't see with our naked eye. He puts cameras where we can't go. And this is also part of the story. I started in the 19th century. The earliest photograph was taken on a piece of writing paper that was sensitized with chemicals. 1843. The calotype process, paper negative photography, had only been invented 2 years before. Our hero standing there with a racket for 1 or 2 minutes. He wasn't moving,
Right.
but he had attitude because he wanted to use his body to express something physical. And I looked through all the photographs of this young man, Mr. Lang, and 8 of them were the same. He's in a tie and jacket. He has a pile of books. His hand rests against his head to steady it. And then there's the one picture of him in a striped jersey holding a racket, and he comes alive. Of course, it took me 2 days to find out what that racket was because the National Gallery of Edinburgh said it was a tennis racket. 1843, the game of tennis hadn't been invented yet. It's
And
royal
nobody
tennis.
told them.
No, I told them after 2 days of trying to track down every leading expert.
Incredible.
It was the game of kings. It was court tennis or real tennis.
Right, the original tennis, yeah. Can you speak a little bit more about this and how long was the process from conception until publication, and even when did you realize that it was going to be something more than just sports photography, something that was going, or was that always part of it?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I like to say that I worked on this project 5 years plus 40 because I've been researching the history of photography for a long time. I wrote the book on Fox Talbot and the invention of photography. I did the show at the Morgan Library. So I've done everything from Fox Talbot to sports. Once I decided to do this crazy thing, which my children said, "Oh my God, Mom, you're going to make an idiot out of yourself. You don't know anything."
Usually when your kids tell you that, that's an incentive to move forward.
Well, I did dedicate it to my 2 grandchildren and my son-in-law.
I like that. That
who
was
was
beautiful.
so desperate that I shouldn't make a fool of myself. He read everything and corrected plenty of things. But I knew what I'm capable of doing. I can't write on sports. That's a given. But I can write about photography. I can write about photography in the world. Most photographs are not just about what you think they're about. And my real compulsion has always been for 40 years to enlarge the canon. If you look at histories of photography, you never, ever see a sports photograph. I mean, they're just not included. Photography has these false hierarchies, that certain subjects are more lofty, more artistic, and I really like breaking down those hierarchies because they're foolish. A great photograph is a great photograph no matter what the subject is. And my drive is to show respect and give dignity to men and women who have dedicated their lives to giving us some of the most exciting photographs that have ever been taken in the history of the medium. And that's why I did the book, because it needed to be done.
So basically, it's a book about amazing photography and the side stories. Coincidentally, they all happen to have something to do with sports.
Well, I need to understand that sports is more than just the game.
Yeah.
And really great photographers do show us why people love sports. I think it is unique in that at the very heart of it is stopping the body in motion, communicating something very physical about us as human beings. And that's been part of art history from the beginning. And photographers do it so well, do it so very
And
well.
we also catch the slivers that visually, if you're just watching the occasion, you wouldn't see in many cases. There's a few photographs you have where they're in the book that there are about a dozen faces facing the camera. I think it was a soccer game or something. Everybody's expression is just so unique.
That's a great photo.
You could never see that if you were at the event. You would not have seen it.
No.
Still photographers are masters of moments. No one does the moment better than a still photographer. And when we are speaking about sports, sports is very much about being in the moment. If you're the player, if you're the spectator, and if you're the photographer. So we can learn more about holding those moments because we do remember through still photographs, whether it's our family photographs, whether it's our kid's birthday or our birthday, we have this very powerful relationship with the still photograph. And again, that's why I did Who Shot Sports, because we watch sports on TV, but what really locks into our memory is the still photograph.
Absolutely. Yeah. I say the same about movies all the time too. When you think of your favorite movie, and what do you think of? Often you think of the still photo, not the these moments of drama within. But in the process of the book, when let's say dealing with the editor, or in the case of the show with the museum, the photos by Warhol and Larry Fink and non-sports, let's call them, was there any pushback against including this, or was that always part of it from the beginning?
Each visionary, each artist brings something different to the mix. And I think it's very important for Andrew D. Bernstein to be in a book with Andy Warhol. Why not? And Larry Fink. I mean, they're not that different. For decades, certain people have been called artists, and other people have been called sports photographers, and other people have been called, baby photographers. But look at the pictures. It's much healthier to mix it up and let the photographs stand on their own.
Photographs by Henry Cartier-Bresson, Robert Capa, Danny Lyon, Walker Evans. You mentioned Edward Muybridge. Annie Leibovitz, Ernst Haas, who was one of my heroes when I started getting into photography. Stephen Wilkes, who's still on top of his game. Howard Schatz, ditto.
Stanley Kubrick.
Stanley Kubrick, that's right, filmmaker. George Silk, Harold Edgerton, Herb Ritz, fashion photographer. Andy Warhol, Albert Watson, and Lewis Carroll.
Yeah. Lewis Carroll.
These are the photographs. They're in this sports photography book, and they're all sports photographs in various ways, and these are not sports photographers.
No, but
which is interesting.
Even if I looked through W. Eugene Smith's assignments before World War II, and he was constantly being given girls' hockey game, running over to people who shot for life and look. They did everything.
Yeah.
The very first photograph that I found, day one, starting this project, box one at the Getty Museum, they brought me out what they had related to sports, and I open up the box, and on the top of the box is a Walker Evans basketball picture. And I immediately saw what he saw, that in a photograph, all the action, all the tension has to take place within the frame. He sees the basketball court with those very rigid lines, and he realizes all the action, all the tension on that basketball court has to take place within those boundaries. Then the way the subjects are spread out. There's 3 white kids on one side, and then in the corner, there's somebody who looks Puerto Rican. And I say to the young girl who brought me the box, oh my God, you don't know if they're going to pick up a ball and play basketball or rumble.
Right.
And she didn't know what I was talking about. And I said, it was taken around the time of West Side,
West Side Story.
Yeah.
I was going to just say
Yeah.
that.
And she said, what? And that's when you were asking me about cultural history. I mean, it was art history because Walker Evans was working with the photographic frame, the frame within the frame. I mean, you could see he was positioning the figures within the white lines of the basketball court, within the frame of the picture. So that's Walker Evans. Cartier-Bresson, I don't know if you know, he was part of the resistance in France. He was captured, I think, 3 times. The 3rd time he actually escaped, but his health was impaired. He had a terrible war, as they say. So he's photographing the 6-day race in the Velodrome d'Ève in Paris. Now, I don't know if you know what that signifies, but the Velodrome is where they rounded up. It was the biggest roundup of French Jews, mostly women and children. Tens of thousands went off to the camp and never came back. So what I write about, when I write about Cartier-Bresson, they're wonderful bicycle pictures showing all aspects of the race, but he's also photographing ghosts because very soon after that they tore the building down because it was the Velodrome of shame. So sports is pretty interesting.
And can I add that the text in the book and the wall text in the museum is incredible. I mean, something along the lines of what you've been talking about now. But I remember the photo. It was of the Pittsburgh, the Little Leaguers in Pittsburgh, and the commentary that you had. I think Charles Teeny Harris, is that the photographer?
Yes.
But just the comments and this analysis were just so insightful.
Well, sports does show transformations within society. This was Teeny Harris, who actually played baseball and had very little education. His pictures define the African American community in Pittsburgh in the 30s, 40s, 50s. And these young little leaguers, the big major league players were coming to celebrate the start of their season, and they're marching in their brand new uniforms, but they're marching into a new world. They're walking into a new world. And the exhibition, Who Shot Sports, is at the Brooklyn Museum. And I don't have to tell anyone, Brooklyn is where sports became integrated. Can you imagine professional sports without African American athletes?
Was there a guiding principle as you were developing this story, or as you went through and when you excluded some photos and other photos? Was there one kind of thread that you tried to stick with as you went along?
Well, I had to believe in the photograph. I had to be able to defend the photograph. But the challenge was, how do I organize the entire book and exhibition? Because it has to be broken up in some ways. And that was a real challenge until I had this eureka moment where I said, well, how do photographers think?
Uh-oh.
Because I know enough that they think about...
Andrew, you want to say something about that?
He will. Well, I'm not talking about the politics, the the hassles. I'm talking about things like vantage point. Where do you put your camera?
Right.
I have a chapter and a section in the exhibition on, photographers placing their cameras in phenomenal, challenging, exciting ways. I did visit Andrew at the Staples Center, and one of the fun experiences was to watch him place his cameras before a game with duct tape.
Clamps.
Very high-tech cameras. But they were all over the place.
Right.
And because he is so good and so professional. He knows what that camera is going to see, what that angle is. But basically, no one could see from these positions. So he's giving the viewer a gift.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by how do photographers think. They also think of the decisive moment. We mentioned Cartier-Bresson. Now, the decisive moment in a game is not the same as a photographer's decisive moment. A photographer's decisive moment is when all the elements in the picture come together. The mood, the composition, the light, the color, to make for a total picture. I have a section on portraiture because, hello, you know, whether it's a Wheatie box or having, actually in my exhibition, I did do something that I thought was a lot of fun. I placed baseball cards right next to the Andy Warhol Polaroids quite intentionally. But these are headshots because these are our heroes, and there are different types of portraiture. I have a section behind the scene, and that's where Andy's photograph of Kobe Bryant is, because a lot of people can take the action, but not everybody has the trust or a relationship with an athlete. And it seems to me from my research, more and more photographers lament that ability to have a relationship. Because when you have two professionals in the room, they do communicate. Whether they're speaking or not, they understand who they are and they're doing a job. So I have behind the scenes. I have one.
The crowds. I mean, for me, that was the. I mean, personally, and because I never had, you know, credentials or access, when I bring my camera to a game, I'm shooting the crowd, the vendors, and the view that we have. So when I saw that was included, it was just such a treat.
It had to be included because what's sport without the fans?
Right.
And it's universal. Fans are crazy in the same way all over the world. They are irrational in the same way.
We'll talk about Argentina in a couple minutes, okay?
whether you know they're sitting on a bench in Africa or sitting in a stadium with tens of thousands of people, it's very important. And really good photographers will turn around and photograph the faces, what they see. So that's what I mean about organizing it by how photographers
And
think.
speaking of Argentina, one of the things I loved that it was what they call the figuritas, which are like the sticker book of Argentine soccer. You had it from the classic era of Argentina with Maradona, but my kids still go nuts over those. Every 4 years when the World Cup comes around, all the books get sent up from Argentina and they get packets of stickers and they still put them in like we did with our trading cards back in the day. And the fact that you knew to include that, I thought that was pretty impressive.
Well, I was doing research at FIFA, and I have to say that was not easy. I knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody, and FIFA is fabulous in their archives. They said no one had ever looked at the vintage prints before me. I was the first person. I mean, other archives should be kept the way these are, perfect boxes, perfect archival sheeting. But then the archivist...
It's in Switzerland, correct? Is that where the headquarters are?
It's in Zurich. But then the archivist said, did I know about Panini albums? And I said, no. And he started to tell me that they're probably the most popular collectibles in the world. And really, we just bought it off eBay for a few dollars. Wow. It's not a complete one.
Yeah. Can you speak a bit about the resources that you sought out and the archives and the places that you went to find these images?
Everywhere, as much as I could do within the amount of time I had. Very important going to meet with the photographers, asking them to show me pictures that they love, maybe that hadn't been published. That's how it had been published, but when I met Andy, he showed me a number of pictures, and I just fell in love with the Kobe Bryant because I hadn't seen it before. One of the criteria is, as I did my research, I learned who maybe innovated something, who did something for the first time, who has a special relationship with an athlete. So a lot of photographs start looking the same, and they're great, but that wasn't what I wanted to put in the book.
Okay. Well, of all the photos I'm sure you've taken of Kobe, I mean, and of course this is a big year for him, and I've seen through social media the relationship that you've had with him over the years is pretty profound, and for that one to be chosen, I think was pretty great. And also, I just assumed it was a post game, but you realize he's soaking his ankles and his finger pre-game. You know,
Absolutely, yeah. That was one of my favorite pictures. Still is maybe top 5 of my whole career.
Wow.
Yeah, everything came together, like Gail said, in that photo, and including the access.
That was
So technically, it was great. I wouldn't say it's a lucky moment because, as Walter Yost, the great guru of sports photography, says that we make our own luck in our business, and preparation is the key, and relationship is one of the vehicles to get you into that inner sanctum.
We'll talk more about this after the break, but do you always go into the locker room and shoot after a game, or is that just occasionally, or
I'm always in there before the game.
before the game?
And sometimes after the game. It depends. This latest project I did with Kobe with his kind of farewell tour, I was in the training room, which is actually the inner sanctum,
right.
where it was just Kobe greeting people after the game, usually in a cold tank of water with a towel around him, and everyone from celebrities to coaches to other players coming in to pay homage to him because it was the last time they would play against him.
Right.
So I was in there to record that.
Now, you mentioned you were always in there before the game, but not always after.
Right.
Why?
Before I love to get the preparation.
Okay.
I just I love. First of all, I have great relationships with the trainers in LA that I've worked with for years and years and years. Jason Powell with the Clippers is a good friend, and Gary Vitti, a former Laker trainer, just retired. 31 years we worked together. So I just sometimes I go in without a camera, and we just shoot the breeze for a while, and the players get accustomed to seeing me in there. The coaches.
You become part of the wallpaper.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the book itself is an amazing timeline where you go through from the 1800s when photography started and sports photography started. You tie in the growth of photography with events in sports, and it's some wonderful things. You talk about specific photographs and the techniques that we used, and it's a great way of following the development of the technology of photography in relationship to sports.
All right. Well, thank you for acknowledging that. I didn't write it because I actually, Nigel Russell is a world expert on cameras, films.
We're going to have
lenses.
Nigel on the show in a couple weeks.
And
That's too much.
and this was actually a nice challenge for him because he knows so much, but he hadn't actually thought about, well, what was,
It's a different context.
yes,
Yeah.
which cameras were really used, and so many of the prototypes are developed for the Olympics.
Yeah.
So that when it wasn't even on the market, you had sports photographers trying something out. But what I discovered, and I think I'm correct on this, is that as a group, sports photographers have pushed camera technology more than any other group. They had to stop the action. And when photography was invented, you couldn't even take pictures of people. It was too slow. So moving right along, sports photographers needed faster cameras, longer lenses, more sensitive material.
More frames per second.
Oh.
Or even a frame per second at one point.
Strobe, sync,
Strobe,
yeah,
something.
flash. Yeah.
I mean, photographers would talk about following focus and then autofocus. I would interview photographers who would develop 35 millimeter film in the back of a car as they raced to the newspaper so that the wet negatives could be printed for the evening newspaper.
You haven't lived until you've done that, by the way. That's
Drawing them, holding them out, or developing in toilets or wherever. Wire services. There's the story of sports photography is a very, very good way to understand the evolution, the technical evolution of photography.
Gail, can you speak at all about maybe some pioneer women photographers who we don't know of, and also women that were included in the show? Is that a tough question? Maybe.
It is because it's a boys' club.
Yeah.
It has been, and it probably still is. One answer is that some of the really best extreme sports photographers today are women.
Right.
They don't have to deal with people edging them out. They don't have to deal with locker rooms. They're fearless. They jump out of airplanes. They disappear in the wilderness for 6 months and come back with great photographs. Toni Frizzell shot for Sports Illustrated. She is better known as a fashion photographer, but she came from a very upper class background. And she wanted to shoot for Sports Illustrated. And a lot of the Sports Illustrated photographers in the early years, in the 1950s, they were sons of immigrants. They didn't know one end of a horse from another, let alone go to a polo game.
Right.
They couldn't photograph skiing in the Alps because they had never been on skis. They couldn't photograph Newport boating, sailing, because they really didn't know anything about it. So she was assigned all these, great
Blue blood.
upper class sports, but she was good. But Robert Rieger, the great sports photographer, he was an illustrator at Sports Illustrated before he really started using a camera. In 1967, he did a huge exhibition called Man in Sport, and it was huge. I think he really wanted it to be a follow-up to
Family of Man?
The Family of Man.
Okay.
That was the most important, biggest exhibition and book MoMA ever had. The Family of Man. It was huge. Hundreds and hundreds of photographs. Only 2 women photographers.
Right.
One was Toni Frizzell, who actually had a good representation of her work, and there was another photographer whose name I forgot, and she had 2. The rest, and there were scores of photographers, were all male. At the opening of my exhibition, it was a kind of reunion. You had Heinz Klutmeier and Walter Joos and a lot of the big name sports photographers from Sports Illustrated, from All Sport. And I asked them a little bit about women sports photographers. Basically, they all were talking about how difficult they made it for women. I wish there were more women.
There will be. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a short break and come back with Andrew.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of the B&H Photography Podcast. Send us a tweet at BHPhotoVideo, #BHPhotoPodcast.
We are back. Okay, Andrew, I have a question. I have a couple of questions for you, actually. I want to talk about how you got into sporting photography. Was it photography or was it sports that came first? And I want to follow that up with a couple of questions about technology. Now, you've been at this for a while, so you remember shooting film, and now
4-letter word. Phil,
That's right. That's correct.
Yeah.
And now, obviously, you're completely electronic and digital. And I'm really curious about something. We now have the ability to remotely fire cameras at 10 plus frames per second. We can position them. We could remotely control. We have an amazing amount of control of what we can do. And if you miss a shot, it's your fault at this point in time. Going back a couple of decades, to get that amazing shot, it was pure skill, intuition, and just knowing exactly when to press that button. Are we getting better pictures today? Is it easy to be a photographer today, or is it more challenging to be a photographer because we've lost all of these skills? I think we have. Anyway.
No, that's a loaded question, Alan. But basically,
in 20 words or less.
Anybody can be a photographer because of the technology we all have in our pocket.
Yeah.
With the iPhone and camera phone, it's wonderful, and it's wonderful for me as a professional photographer to know that my 8-year-old daughter has the ability to take a photograph and feel good about it. And she actually won a contest in the 2nd grade because she took a cool photograph with her iPhone camera. I don't know if we're getting better pictures today. I think that the profession stays pretty much the way it's always been. There's a hierarchy of professional photographers who do it for a living, who create images rather than just snap images. You know, I go crazy when somebody says, "Oh, that's a great snapshot you took." You know,
Ooh.
it's not a snapshot. You know,
We all winced in the studio when that came out.
if I took it with my iPhone, it would be a snapshot. If it took me 6 hours to set it up and prepare and create it, it's not. It's actually what I do for a living.
Yeah.
You know. But going back to your first question about did sports or photography come first? I had to think about that for a second, but I think sports came first. I grew up in Brooklyn and played every imaginable sport, from street hockey to stickball and
I was just going to say
basketball and everything.
Stickball, sure.
We played tackle football in my elementary schoolyard that didn't have any grass. It was cement in the winter.
In the winter, right?
But I was always the smallest guy, and I was always picked last. But I love sports. I love to play them, and my biggest connection with my father was through sports. My dad was a diehard Brooklyn Dodger fan, and I was born the year that the Dodgers moved in '58. And
He didn't blame you for that, did he?
no, actually my dad and my uncles wore a black armband for a year. No, it's a true story. If you see photos of our family, they're wearing a black armband, and I thought growing up that they were mourning that I was born. But it was actually because the Dodgers left. So I became a Mets fan because I could not utter the word, much less even think in my consciousness the word Yankee in my house, because they hated them. Because they always beat the Dodgers, of course. I became a Mets fan, and then
And the Indians, by the way.
Yeah,
Sorry
but
to
we
say.
connected. My dad and I connected over the Rangers. My grandfather and then my dad had season tickets to the Rangers at the old Garden and then the new Garden. And I went to almost every Ranger game from maybe 9 years old until I left for college at 17 with my dad. So that was our connection. So when I started to discover photography when I was about 14, it was because my dad gave me a camera, actually.
Do you remember the camera?
Yes, it was a Canon TL.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a very... I'm going to tell a story, and it's going to be a little long, but I'll tell it anyway. My dad buys me this camera right before he and I are going to go on a trip out west to all the national parks. And in those days, as you remember, Kodachrome came with a mailer, right?
Yeah.
It had a bright yellow mailer. So you would take the film wherever you were. It was prepaid. Put it in the mailer. Put it in a mailbox anywhere in the country.
Upload it to the mailbox.
Yeah, right. Drop it in the mailbox, and then lo and behold, in your mailbox at home, weeks later would come a yellow box with slides in it. Right. So my dad was a clinical psychologist by trade, but thought of himself as a amateur photographer. That he was this great photographer, and he's going to teach his son, everything about photography. So he buys me this camera. There's going to be like a bonding thing on our trip, and we go out there, and he's got his mailers, and I have my mailers, and we're dropping them in, Yosemite and in Yellowstone, and these podunk towns in the middle of nowhere, thinking we'll never see the film again because it's going in some random mailbox. And we come, this is a true story. We come home from the trip, and there are like hundreds of yellow boxes, right? And in giant boxes at our house, and my mother didn't know what to do with it. And we start opening the boxes, and my dad is like, "Oh, this is an incredible picture of Old Faithful, and look at this one of Mount Rainier, and this one of Yosemite or whatever." And I said, "Dad, that's one whole roll, right?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "But you're in those pictures." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I took those. That's my roll of film." So I realized right then that and he did begrudgingly that I actually had a talent and an eye, and
And he never spoke to you again.
he never spoke to me again. No. But I in high school I took it up, and I had a very good friend who had a dark room in his basement, and he was so generous to teach me photography. And my big high school, Midwood High School in Brooklyn, had a monthly newspaper and a yearbook. I became the editor of both of those. Then when I went to the University of Massachusetts, which did not have a bona fide photography department, and didn't even have a class in photography, but we had a very prestigious daily newspaper that was the actual newspaper that the town would get before any other real
Amherst?
newspaper.
Amherst? Is that what
Amherst,
you're
yeah.
talking about? Okay.
Boston Globe was an afternoon paper in Western Massachusetts. So I covered everything. Like Gail was talking about, I covered everything from Jimmy Carter's presidential campaign to dance concerts to sports to dorm life. I started working for the fraternities and sororities and all that stuff. But
And
I
every
really,
day was a new challenge.
And it was
because
great.
You had something you had to learn every day.
yeah, and like 3 weeks into my freshman year, I became the assistant photo editor because they saw that, I was there all the time. So I really enjoyed it, but I gravitated towards sports, and I realized that I needed to get some sports. I needed to get some real technical photography training, which I wasn't getting at UMass. So I transferred to Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California, and met a bunch of Sports Illustrated photographers through my teachers there, and that was really
Was
where
that
it took
school
off.
known for sports photography training or photography in general?
Art Center was and still is a hardcore commercial advertising
Right.
institution, where I was the black sheep of my class. I was told I would never make it. I went in for my senior review. It was eight semesters, and you go in before your eighth term to the chairman of the department, who was a contemporary of Ansel Adams, and founded the photography department at Art Center. And he looked at me, he says, "Kid, nobody makes money doing what you want to do." And I said, "Well, have you heard of John Zimmerman or Neil Leifer?" And he goes, "Well, there may be an exception or two. And have you seen Sports Illustrated?" But they trained us to be commercial photographers, to open a studio, to work in fashion, do huge car productions and things like that. So I wanted, I'm a Brooklyn kid. I wanted to prove everybody wrong.
Mm-hmm. God bless you.
And I had two teachers that were incredibly supportive and mentors, and are to this day, 40 years later. Bill Robbins was one of my teachers that got my foot in the door with Sports Illustrated. And Jim Cacavo, who was a Vietnam veteran photographer. He actually was a combat photographer who lost 53 friends in Vietnam, fellow news photographers. And Jim's still a dear friend, but they believed in me and they pushed me, and I never looked back. I decided that's what I wanted to do.
Was there a big break? Was there the first big job or the first photo that sent you skyward? Or
Well, that's a great question, John, because there actually was. I was shooting everything and anything, any sport, just to build up my portfolio, stuff I never even heard of. I mean, who knew from rugby, growing up in Brooklyn?
Right.
And
That's right.
and in those days, you could just walk in. I could walk into UCLA or Pepperdine and with a camera, or USC or wherever, and just plop myself down and shoot. So I was shooting, water polo and rhythmic gymnastics, and there was a great pre-Olympic tournament, which I don't think they have anymore, but it was held by the U.S. Olympic Committee in Colorado Springs, called the National Sports Festival, where every sport that the U.S. teams were going to participate in was showcased. So I went out to that, and my dad at the time was living in Colorado Springs, so it was perfect. And I spent 5 or 6 days just shooting one sport after the other, building up my portfolio. And I got a call from the public relations director of the North American Soccer League team, long defunct team, that the Cosmos were part of, Pele paid for. In Los Angeles, the team was called the Aztecs. And they're looking for a photographer. They were going to pay like $35 a game or some unknown, crazy amount. And would I be interested? And I lived in Pasadena. They played at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena at night. And I was finishing up school, so I was still in school during the days. It kind of worked out. I built a darkroom in my garage, like Gail was talking about. And I went in for the interview, and they started asking me questions about soccer. Now, I didn't know anything about soccer. I'd never really seen soccer. I didn't play it. We didn't grow up with it. But I was a huge hockey fan. So I'm figuring it's like hockey, but it's on grass. It's bigger. And, and I just...
And you hit the puck with your head.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And I winged it. And I owned one camera. I didn't even have a long lens, which you need for soccer.
Right.
So they hired me. And that was my first real break. And my second really big break was when the Dodgers hired me in 1984. And I was their team photographer for 11 years. So the last time they won the World Series, which was '88, I was working for them, so they obviously missed me terribly. And then, of course, I was in the right place at the right time for the resurgence of the NBA, the explosion during the Magic Bird era, Showtime, and really just kind of built my reputation up through that Showtime era, and Pat Riley was a great supporter of mine, so I, have a lot to thank him for.
Is there a difference between a successful photograph in general and a successful sporting photograph?
Well, Gail spoke very eloquently about it, that the decisive moment is what it is, and I was very much into photojournalism and the greats of photojournalism, and prided myself on always trying to be, I always said you have to have a little bit of ESP in what I do. Like you have to be like a millisecond ahead of what, be able to anticipate. And it comes from experience, but also from knowledge of the sport.
Right.
Or knowledge of that particular player. Magic would come down the court and he'd do 15 moves before the ball ended up either in somebody's hand or he went to the basket. Now, keep in mind, I shoot with a strobe system in the arena, which allows me to shoot one picture every 4 seconds. So I can't be motor driving Magic coming down the court. I have to wait for the decisive moment, the peak action. Now, of course, I'd miss it a lot because you just guess wrong or arm in the face or a referee gets in the way or whatever, or you, God forbid, out of focus. But I think more than anything, a great photograph, like any photograph, it could be a landscape, it could be a portrait, it could be a war photograph, it could be a picture of a baby, it could be a sports photograph. It has to elicit a response, an emotion from the viewer. And I think sports helps that because it's dramatic to begin with. And like Gail said, the celebration of the human form and what the human body can do. I mean, I'm still fascinated thousands of games into my NBA career, what these athletes can do with their bodies. It's just mind-blowing to me. I have a daughter that's a dancer, and I see the parallel between what she does and what these guys do. And it's, completely different disciplines, but it's amazing to me.
Can you speak a bit about your setup, your gear, I know from what I've read anyway, you carry two cameras, two lenses around your neck, and you have several set up around the arena. Can you speak to the specifics of that?
Well, I'll run you through a timeline. Our game, let's say a game is at 7:30, and my assistant arrives about 3 o'clock, 3:30. And we are lucky enough at Staples Center that everything's in one place. So the teams I work for are housed in Staples Center: Lakers, Clippers, and Kings, and the Sparks during the summertime, the WNBA team. So we're lucky enough to be able to keep all our equipment in a cage there, that things don't have to be packed and unpacked like when we go on the road. So he gets there and lays everything out, and basically we do a setup of 7 to 9 remote cameras every game. So the cameras have to be placed in strategic spots around the arena, everywhere from on the stanchion, through the backboard, above the backboard, in the floor. I actually invented a position where we cut out a piece of the stanchion pad, and we actually place the camera basically in the floor, on railings around the arena, and overhead position in the catwalk looking straight down. In the old days, we used to actually have human remotes. I literally had assistants who would sit with cameras and they would focus, because this was the pre-autofocus, and I would fire them through this remote control system that we have. And then I come in usually around 4:30 or 5. And luckily, my office is in Staples Center, so I can usually be in the office before I come down for a game. And the rough setup is already being done. We have an intern usually that helps us every game as well. And we set up where I am, which is on my spot at a basketball game, is on the opposite side to where our remotes are set up. And my position has 2 handheld cameras and 2 more cameras that I walk around with. And so it's basically could be an 11 camera setup, 11, 12 camera
Do you
setup
leave
for
any of these
game.
cameras set up all the time, or is everything taken down completely? I mean, I mentioned some of these locations could be kind of hard to get to.
The only location we keep a camera up all season long is our overhead, our straight down catwalk position.
Okay.
And every camera and lens is paired with a brain, a transceiver, and that receives a signal from the main brain, which I trigger with a auxiliary trigger button, and it's all done by radio. In the old days, it had to be wired, so we would be actually wiring a camera with a wire that flew down from the catwalk to the basket, ran all the way around the court to me with a plunger button. Now we helped to develop a system about 20 years ago with a company in Vermont that developed this Flash Wizard system that's all done by radio. But all the other cameras have to be removed and packed up.
What brand? What camera do you use?
It's all Nikon.
All Nikon?
And I started with Canon at the beginning of my career. And unfortunately, Canon didn't have a high enough sync shutter speed that could stop the action with flash. They had a 90th of a second, and then they went up to 125th of a second. But we were still, wasn't fully stopping the action. You get a lot of motion and ghosting. And all of a sudden, here comes Nikon with a 250th sync, which was I think it was the FM2 or FE2.
Yeah, FM2. Yep.
And so I moved over to Nikon. I've been with them ever since.
What lenses are they all different lenses, or is everything?
Yeah, in the old days, we used to use prime lenses, and that's before zoom lenses became so useful, and now we're using all zoom lenses. But my overhead is an 80 to 400, probably at about 300 millimeter. My camera through the glass of the backboard is essentially about a 20. The one at the base on the floor is at an 18. Ones on the railings are 70 to 200s. My handheld I use 28 to 300 in one of my handhelds, and the other is a 200 to 400 on a monopod. And then my walking around camera has usually a 16 to 35 and a fisheye. I'm kind of covered with all that stuff.
And the fisheye, you find yourself, is that for action underneath the net?
No, I love the fisheye for my pregame ritual, like when the captains meet before the game and I'm in the circle with the referees, or coaches holding his pregame chat with the players before they do tip-off, or a wide shot of the arena, or sometimes it's fun to shoot fans with the fisheye. I bring it into the locker room sometimes.
And do you have an assistant that follows you around just for handing off cameras and gear, or are you just on your own?
No, I'm on my own once the game starts. My assistant, Adam Pantozzi, who you know really well, who I stole from New York, is my number one guy, and he's the guy in charge of the setup. And he's in charge of also making sure that that the cameras are working. We have a tethering system now, that our cameras are actually tethered through a network back to NBA Photos in New Jersey. So as I'm shooting and as these remote cameras are shooting, they're transmitting the photos directly back to New Jersey in real time. And we like to call it live coverage because it really is. And an editor at NBA Photos in New Jersey is receiving the photos, is selecting the ones that will eventually get captioned and sent up to Getty.
Does it bother you that you're not seeing all this stuff coming out and you're not doing all the editing and selecting and stuff like that? I mean,
no, I trust these guys, and especially trust Adam and whoever's editing for me on site, because they really know what they're looking for.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I totally trust
And can you monitor the cameras? Do you monitor what's going on, or do you just know what you're doing and everything else?
yeah, do you chimp along the way?
I do chimp. It's hard to chimp, actually, because the action is going on, and because it's in real time. you can't chimp and delete.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah, I realize it. Yeah, it's
but
like-
sometimes I want to see. Oh, did I get that one? That kind of thing. But Adam monitors what's going back to NBA photos through the feed, so he
So-
can see if something's not working.
If there's a
right.
problem, you find out
exactly.
real
and
fast.
and sometimes the cameras aren't syncing and not
Yeah.
getting strobe, or a camera that's placed under the stanchion gets kicked a lot,
Yeah.
so he has to come out and readjust it and things like that.
Do you ever have any? Because you do a lot of stuff with remotes. Do you ever have problems where somebody else in that arena is firing off your gear and you're just you're losing it?
Absolutely. My handheld cameras, the ones I usually walk around with, are triggered by the strobes are triggered by Pocket Wizard.
Right.
So before they invented custom channels, Pocket Wizard only had, I think, 4 channels.
Yes.
Or maybe 8 or something. Or
It
whatever.
was
It's
four. Yeah,
4 channels.
4 channels.
So we used to have the X Games for years at Staples Center, and I used to shoot it, and my assistants used to shoot the X Games with strobe, and all of a sudden we'd see the strobes going off. And it turned out that some people would bring Pocket Wizards in and just kind of scan the channels until they hit the channel that fired our strobe system. And it happened more than once. It probably happened half a dozen times.
Huh. And is the Staples Center, are you guys kind of far and away advanced in terms of your setup compared to other arenas, or is that kind of standard, the what you described?
I'd say about half the photographers in the NBA do as almost as big or as big a setup as I do every game.
Okay.
Some photographers don't.
Right.
You know, some photographers don't shoot with any remotes, but this has been my kind of way of doing business.
I have to repeat that sports photographers have really pushed camera technology.
Yeah.
They've either innovated themselves or they found somebody to work with. And as Andy said, his daughter's a dancer. Well, you'd think dance photographers also are faced with bodies moving, but they haven't pushed the technology
Yeah.
the way.
They're not getting paid
Yeah.
as much either.
Yeah.
Usually.
Well, the
and
technology.
they don't have the outlets
That
necessarily.
is probably a case in point.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons the technology, we pushed it to the limit, is that during the Jordan era, when Michael would have this iconic dunk, we'd get one shot at it, and that would be one picture of that moment that could be sold to one entity for use. So when this company, LPA, out of Vermont, approached us about trying to develop a multi-camera system that could fire on one single strobe burst, which is pretty amazing if you think about it.
There's just one light, one strobe.
One strobe goes off.
Where
yes.
it's
yeah,
in the center above.
in Staples Center, we have 3 separate sets of strobes, and each set of strobes consists of 8 packs, 2,400 packs, and Speedotron heads. So when I push my shutter button, these 8 packs and heads go off like one gigantic flash that's on your camera. But you can only shoot once every 4 seconds because it'd have to recycle back up. And before this technology, you could get one image, right? So we thought, wow, wouldn't it be great to get Michael Jordan's dunk from 5 or 6 angles that could be sold to 5 or 6 entities? And you're not selling the same photograph, you're selling the same moment.
Yeah.
So it really was very self-serving. You know?
Capitalism at its heart, right there.
Yeah, and it took a lot of R&D and a lot of frustration, and we couldn't get this thing to work. And this is back in the film days where I was using Hasselblads to shoot game action. It was a leaf shutter, and it was a big lag in the shutter, and it wasn't syncing with the strobes, and one camera would have a different lag than the other one, and it just was a nightmare.
Can you speak to this then? I mean, you're like on the front lines of the digital tech. Has it changed everything in the way you work and the way even the way you think, or not so much?
I don't know. I got to say I'm very old school, and I miss the film days. I miss seeing that piece of film, and especially the 2 1/4, which was beautiful. And I was dragged kicking and screaming into the digital era. I mean, I still, I have to do it. But the days of film and manual focus and manual exposure and all that stuff, that is the true kind of roots of photography for me.
aside from the fact that you happen to like the aesthetics of film, are you getting more successful photographs now based on your skill set, knowing how you've evolved and you understand the game, the equipment, everything else? Are you still staying ahead of it?
I got to tell you, it's kind of taken a little bit of the fun out of it because, when you had to manually focus and try to get a guy dunking and you got one frame at it and you're shooting with a Hasselblad. And,
If it came out, that's because
Yeah.
you did everything right.
right. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying that it's easier now. It just, I don't know, it's not as challenging.
How does your work different than, let's say, you're a standard beat photographer or a newspaper photographer? Is there can you draw an easy distinction between what you're doing and what they're doing?
Well, I have to do what they're doing and 20 other things because a news photographer who I respect, some of my best friends are longtime news photographers. They're there to record a moment or something having to do with the story of the game, which I'm there to do also for the NBA, but I'm still working for the Lakers.
Right.
So that the Lakers are going to need isolated shots of this player or that player, or I have to shoot the coach, or I have to shoot the fans, or there's stuff going on for the marketing department. There's like 900 things going on at a game. And I've been able to kind of delegate some of that to kind of free me up. But I have to have a very wide vision of what's going on. And when I go to an NBA Finals game, for example, it's not just what's going on in front of me, but it's everything else.
How many people do you have on an average game working on your team?
There's 4 of us, usually 3 or 4. And
you're all shooting.
No, only myself is shooting.
Okay.
So I have my main assistant, and then I have an intern who's kind of a second set of hands for my assistant. And sometimes we have a digital tech. So sometimes there's 2 of us at a given Laker game or Clipper game. When we get to the NBA All-Star game or the finals, then it's a big crew. Then it's, I would say, all told, it's probably 25 photographers, techs, assistants, of which I think 5 of us are photographers, 2
So
of us
a lot
on
of
the
it
court.
is just support and making sure everything is working the way it should be working.
Right, and some photographers have certain assignments, like at the finals, for example, they're only shooting the commissioner. Some photographers assigned to the commissioner and all his VIP guests. Another photographer is assigned to everything happening in the periphery, from fans to concession stands to exteriors to all that stuff. It's myself and my cohort, Nat Butler, on the court. And then we usually have 2, sometimes 3 photographers from elevated positions. And 5 of us are actually covering the game.
And so at that point, you're working for the NBA.
Yes.
And let's say the Lakers are in the finals.
Yeah.
Who are you working for?
Well, I'm working for the NBA. The Lakers have access to everything I shoot through the NBA and through the NBA's agreement with Getty. But I also have to have my staff who's taking care of the Laker needs as well. Right. So the Lakers will have sponsorship and marketing things going on. So I have to have photographers assigned to that. Ownership might need a photographer for guests they're entertaining. So it's a production.
Yeah.
Is it safe to assume that these images belong to the NBA?
It is very safe to assume that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What about
And
credit?
Gail can speak to that.
Does your name
Gail's love.
appear on the photograph
Yes.
and credits?
Yeah, for my NBA pictures that are published, it's my name / NBAE, which is NBA Entertainment /
Okay.
Getty Images. So Getty and the NBA have a licensing deal together, and luckily I get my name for the
And
there too.
you feed the beast and get a byline.
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
the old days of owning your copyright are over.
You're in a high pressure position where you have to get the winner every single time.
Well, the problem that we have as sports photographers, not just in basketball but across the board, is that TV is broadcasting the game with 15, 25 cameras from every possible angle. So my boss is watching it back in New Jersey,
yeah.
and if he doesn't see that Kobe Bryant dunk or that incredible move or last second shot, if I didn't get that, he knows within 2 seconds.
Well, that is one of the
Interesting.
challenges, and back to the decisive moment is you may have an incredible decisive moment, but it could have been a second quarter pass as opposed to the game-winning shot. And no one's going to care about that decisive moment if it's not the winner. At least not
I
for the
do.
paper.
Gail
side.
does.
Gail does.
I
Right.
do.
Yeah.
Good point. Thank you.
I think Gail could care
There's only a
less.
book every so often.
She could care less. In fact, if you go to the exhibition, I don't think that you see one picture of a guy holding a championship trophy or or whatever. That was not what you were looking for.
Ski
You were
goggles
looking
and
for
champagne.
the moment and how artful it is.
Well, I had issues with particular photographers because they were so proud of an incredible sports photograph that they took. Barton Silverman really wanted me to exhibit and to reproduce his Joe Namath jumping up to throw the pass.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Joe never jumps up to throw a pass.
Right.
Do you know how important this photograph is?
Right.
I said, well, no, I don't, but I like other photographs better.
Mm.
He said, but they're not as important in photography and in sports history. And I was-
I like the one at Joe Bullside, though. You know,
I love
with the-
that one.
Yeah.
was great.
and Walter Yost said, could you imagine Tom Brady doing
I
that
read
today?
that. Yeah. And what photos are of yours are most recognized, most well known, and what are you most proud of? Are there any photos you can speak of?
Well, I've been lucky to have been to some really amazing events. I mean, I was there when Kirk Gibson hit the home run, the home run, probably the greatest home run in the history of baseball. So I was able to record that and get a photo of that. Michael Jordan's first championship, for example, where he's hugging the trophy and crying with his dad,
His dad
next
right
to
there,
him, you know, in 1991, and Magic and Bird intertwined, and that was the '87 finals, I believe. Moments with Kobe, for example, just when he just retired this past April, walking off the court for the last time and waving goodbye. I photographed all of Shaq's career. So I've been, lucky to have been to some great events, covered every Olympic team since 1992, including the Dream Team.
Right.
So there might be a few out there that people remember.
Oh, for sure. Well, I mean, I know I do. But any one obscure photo that people haven't seen that you're just proud of because you caught the moment, or for an artistic composition, or anything off the top of your head?
Well, there's not one specific photograph, but there are sports that I shot that I wish I still did, because I used to love shooting tennis. Loved it. I always said at the beginning of my career, if I could become the tennis tour photographer, it would be the greatest career ever, because you could travel all over the place. You're shooting tennis. I love shooting boxing. Boxing was tremendous. I was Oscar De La Hoya's first official photographer when he broke in professionally in '92, and that's only because the Dream Team guys during the '92 Olympics used to go watch boxing on the off night. So players like Karl Malone and Drexler and those guys became friends with Oscar. And so I used to tag along, and I met Oscar, and in a pro, he said, "Yeah, why not? Be my official guy." So it's been a good ride. But I just have to talk about the exhibition in the book, because it's so unbelievably gratifying, humbling. I don't even know what the words are to express how I feel about being in an exhibition with the godfathers of sports photography, and these icons of media that I didn't even know were sports photographers. I mean, I'm in an exhibition with Stanley Kubrick, really. I mean, and Neil Eifer and Walter and all these guys that paved the way. And to go back to Brooklyn, where I came from, and it's just such an amazing full circle experience. Yeah.
Wow.
I would not have done the show without you.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew was so generous, not just with his own photographs, but really teaching me, because I had a lot to learn. And he invited me to the Staples Center. He showed me how he worked. And he also, not every sports photographer is easy, but for the most part, they're not like the rock and roll photographers, and they respect each other, and that's what was really gratifying. And even Walter Yost, who is considerably older than Andy, I had so many emails from him thanking me and telling me how much he learned. He kept on saying, I learned so much from this book. So that is really gratifying.
Yeah.
Because I didn't think I could teach anybody anything.
Well, we're a very small community, really, of professional sports photographers, and we've been kind of the poor stepchild or poor third cousin to even photojournalists, news photographers, and for Gail to take this incredible risk, I guess, to try to elevate us as photographers who belong in the same conversation with some of the great photographers.
Yeah. Gail, so the show is on at Brooklyn Museum until...
January 8th, 2017.
Okay, so we have a few more months to go. And I'm going to repeat it again. I know I said it early on. I did not see the show yet, but I know, according to John, that the book and the show are very closely related as far as content. And the book just blew me away. Again, I'm not a sports person, but I find it as a photographic document, as a piece of information, and as source of inspiration. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. You did a great job.
Thank you.
You really did.
Thank
It's
you.
just nice. And I got to catch the show before
Where can
it's
we find the
closed.
book?
Local bookstores, museum shops, and online.
And of course, at the bookstore at the Brooklyn Museum.
Correct.
So,
Yes.
with signed copies by Gail.
Signed copies.
So.
And Journey to the Ring is available, I'm sure, if you look for
you
it
can
online.
you can
Yeah.
still get it online, journeytothering.com, or through an online service that we all know.
Right.
And not too many copies of that went around, but they actually are selling the book at the Brooklyn Museum,
they are.
which I was shocked when I saw it. That was wonderful.
They should have had you sign them.
Yeah,
They should have.
yeah. I was flabbergasted when I saw it. There. It was wonderful.
Do you keep an Instagram account or anything?
I
on
do. I
there?
have an Instagram account. It's ADB Photo Inc.
Okay.
And I post photos from my career, milestones or whatever. If we're approaching something like this week, for example, Shaq and Yao Ming and Allen Iverson are going into the Hall of Fame, so I'll start posting some vintage photos that I shot of
good.
them.
Okay.
And I would love, people to follow me. It would be great.
And Gail, do you want to GailBuckland.com?
.com.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Gail. Thank you, Andrew. It's a really wonderful, wonderful discussion
Yeah, it's
today.
fun.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. And remember, give us a rating on iTunes. Let us know what you think, because what you think is what we want to do. So, as usual, thank you all very much for tuning in today.